Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the the fourth episode of the Process of Fat Loss podcast. Here, I'm Nick here at GCP with Trevor, and today we're going to talk about the most important macronutrient for fat loss. So, there are a lot of diets out there that call for restricting different things, low carb, high carb, stuff like that, even low fats. But we would think something a little bit different. I know we talk about why we would think that probably protein is the most important. So Trevor's going to do is kind of go a little bit into that, give some reasons why the protein would be the most important thing for fat loss, why we should pay attention to it the most. So I'm going to let you kind of get into that a little bit here.
Yeah. So protein is the most important macro, and I don't think there's a very good argument any other way, if I'm being honest. But Let me break down the three types of macros. It's protein, fats, and carbs. That's on the macronutrient level. So there's different diets that debate, okay, should we be more carbs? Should we be more fats? And or should we be more protein? I think the underlying of most of them is protein is usually in that category somehow, right? Some diets that completely eliminate fats, some completely eliminate carbs, but never do they ever completely eliminate protein. So it's probably, for many reasons, as you look through all diets, it's like a staple in everything because it needs to be, because it's the building block. So that's really what this comes down to. These are kind of my top three reasons why it's part of everything and why you need to probably almost focus on it more than the other macros, because it changes how the body looks and feels if we do that. So, every perspective I come from is on these podcasts is looking at it from a fat loss point of view. You could probably tell me, if you're an endurance athlete, that carbohydrates might be more. Okay, cool. That's a very specific spectrum that they're looking through, a paradigm. I'm looking at through it as a person for fat loss purposes, and even probably muscle building purposes. We're in that kind of category range of that. So I just want to make sure we're looking down the right lens that people are talking about, because I don't want arguments about if I'm an endurance athlete. Well, that's not what we're actually talking about here. So, okay, so here are my top three reasons. So the first one would be it's nutrient dense. And so if you'll listen to our podcast consistently, the main topic that I talk about is nutrient density. I think there's a lot of different ways to create that, but everything comes back to that idea that how much micronutrients do we get from everything we eat? Because micronutrients are the building blocks of our body, right? They're the things that make everything function. Yeah. There's sodium, the potassium, the zinc, the selenium, all the different categories of those things. They are what makes the building blocks of our body function. The macronutrients are the makeup of the micronutrients. So the idea is that we got to focus on what gets us the most micronutrients, because then our body functions at one more optimal point. So when many people think of meat, they only think of protein, right? So they don't really think about the micronutrients. When they think of meat, they're just okay, I need protein, but they have no idea what protein is. They might understand it's the branched chain amino acids, which are important, but it's a whole bigger picture than that. It's the creatine, the B vitamins, the folic acids, the zinc, the selenium. The list goes on forever. That's in meat. Meat is, especially when you're on that ruminant meat, so grazing animals cows and goat and sheep, and lamb would be a sheep, bison, things that graze. There's just so many nutrients into there. Now, as a chicken and pork, maybe not as many nutrients, because they don't get they don't have a stomach that kind of breaks that stuff down. But in terms of that, it's still better for you than most vegetables are. So I really honestly believe, on the nutrient density side, that beef is probably the single most nutrient food in the world. By itself, if you just had beef all the time, you would probably cover most of the nutrients that you would need. Now, different cuts of beef, in terms from the ribeye to the shoulder, to the different cuts of a beef, are important, and especially organ meats are important in that category too. So I think organ meats are nature's multivitamin. If you eat liver, kidney, and heart, you'll literally cover every little macronutrient or micronutrient you could ever dream of. Of course, they don't taste great for the average person, so you can supplement those with desiccated supplements. I use desiccated liver and beef organs, because I don't like to eat those meats, but I do get the nutrients from those desiccated liver, and that's my multivitamin. So using regular multivitamin, I'm using stuff from organs. So they can replenish and kind of top off your body to 100%, whereas multivitamins are not even hitting that 100 percentile, and not everything is digestible. So the number one thing is meat is extremely nutrient dense. From there, I think a big category that our clientele is looking for consistently is building muscle and making sure that their skin's improving. And this kind of 1A, 1B, or 2A, 2B category. But as we all know, protein is the building block of muscle, right? So we know that if we
Yeah.
want to build
Yep.
more muscle, we've got to eat protein. I don't think there's anybody that probably really would battle against me on that. It's like, oh no, you're wrong there. There's nothing else that could do it because we got to have that tissue, the building blocks, the branched chain amino acids to rebuild it.
Mm-hmm.
In the world of fitness, we break that tissue down a lot. So every single workout you're doing, you're taking that myofilament, right? You're literally just destroying. Not to get too technical, you're destroying the muscle tissue, and then during the workout you destroy it. You just shred it all to pieces, right? And then when you eat the protein, it helps rebuild that tissue to a stronger, more dense thing, so it can take that load again. Then we tear it apart again and we rebuild it. So we got to have that stuff to rebuild it. Otherwise, we're just tearing it down. And I've seen this happen to people that lose muscle over time. They just tear it down and they never get enough protein back to rebuild it. And all of a sudden they become skinny fat, where they like maybe have lost some weight, but they actually haven't gained any muscle, and they're actually losing muscle over time. So in terms of that, it's really important to make sure that we're rebuilding that tissue. As we exercise, the body breaks down the muscle tissue, and it takes 24 to 72 hours to rebuild that. So it doesn't actually rebuild during the workout; it rebuilds after it when we get the proteins and the right building blocks the body needs to make sure that those things are recovering well. Another component of that is that it's important for our skin. So our skin is continuously shedding, right? So it's not like a reptile where we're losing big chunks of skin, but we are continuously, that's like the dander around your house, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that you're always cleaning up, the dust bunnies, is really skin. It's kind of gross when you think about it, but it's our skin consistently, it's shedding. It's pretty much like, it's like when you burn your skin during a sunburn, it's peeling off. We're just doing that in small little flakes. So as we do that, we need collagen to rebuild that tissue, right? All of our skin is made of collagen, and so we need that. And we need that. That comes from when you're eating beef and meats. You're getting that collagen from the connective tissue that's holding the fats and on the bones in the joint. That's connective tissue. That's amazingly good collagen for the body for us to use and to eat. So getting that from the meat, I'm leaning more on the meat side of this, but getting that from a protein source. You can also get supplement like collagen powders and stuff as well. I do find the stuff in the meat to be a little bit more digestible and a little bit more usable, but the powders still work too. But this helps the skin become healthier. It makes it like almost like glowing, right? When you have somebody has a really good collagen base and a really good meat base to their diet, they'll have better looking skin. Their skin will look cleaner and just look a little bit more, I'd say, glowing or healthy. Whereas somebody that doesn't have that in their diet consistently might have a lot more drier skin, have more eczema, things of that nature. And the third category that we go into is satiating. So this is probably the most important one for fat loss, because the idea is like if I can stay full more often on less food, I should lose weight, right? It's a calorie in versus calorie out philosophy. So if you're eating a high carbohydrate diet, you're kind of always starving, meaning like you're always at that part where like, so if I restrict my diet on a carbohydrate diet, let's say we're eating both of them at 1,500 calories. I'm eating mainly a lot more protein, or one I'm eating a lot more carbohydrates. So it's like a 30% to 40% protein category versus a 40 to 50% carb category. So when you restrict that 1,600 calories, if that's a low calorie range for you, when you have carbs in your diet, you're always hungry. You're like, oh my God, I'm just waiting for that next meal. I'm always hungry because I'm restricting. But if you did that same thing with protein, you're eating protein consistently and you ate enough of it, you actually wouldn't be that hungry because your body, it gets satiated by eating the protein. It gets fats. It takes a while for it to break down the protein. Makes it like protein's not as easily digestible, meaning like it takes a while for it to break down and just can't instantly go through the system. So it takes that, our body can work on that for a while and pull the calories out of that. So that's kind of good for the body because it keeps it satiated, keeps it fuller for a longer period of time. Most people undereat protein at each meal, but they overeat carbs, which makes them want more food later. So let's say we're going on the opposite side. Now we're eating a giant meal. If I'm eating a big meal, let's just say like Thanksgiving Day dinner, right? And if I chose that Thanksgiving Day dinner, I ate mainly just meat, and the other one I ate mainly all the like a little bit of meat, but I ate mainly like potatoes and stuffing, all that stuff. From like an hour and a half later, after eating all the stuffing and stuff, I'm probably over at the table trying to like get some more. But if I ate that entire amount in protein, I would be stuffed for the rest of the day, and I wouldn't have to think twice about eating more food because I'd be fully stuffed. And so that's a good strategy for like the holidays, is eating a lot more protein because of that. But it's because it takes longer to break down, your body has to take a while to digest, and it has all the nutrients it needs, so the body's not asking for more nutrients. The feeling of being full is honestly great. I'm not talking about like being stuffed. I'm talking about the idea of like, when I get done with a meal, like, I feel good, I'm good here. I don't have to really eat until the next meal. But with carbohydrates a lot, we're waiting for that next meal to eat. And like, oh my God, I can't wait till that next meal. That's why a lot of people on a high carbohydrate diet eat 4 or 5 meals a day. On a protein diet, they eat more like 2 meals a day. So obviously that's more like very specific, like on those high level protein versus high level carbohydrates diets. But it's just more the idea that when we eat more protein naturally, if we can increase our protein intake, we can feel more full. So it makes it a more powerful macronutrient in terms of weight loss, because if we eat more of it, we actually get less hungry. Whereas with carbohydrates, and fat can be kind of in that same category. We eat more fat, but with fat, we just sometimes get way too many calories on a fat loss diet, right? So like we have to be careful with that one. But with the carbohydrates, if we eat too many carbohydrates, we might not get the same amount of calories. We might not have as many calories in the carbohydrates, but we are not as full as often on the carbohydrates.
Yeah. I think one thing that you said that is important to remember too is like thinking of it in the perspective of fat loss, right? Now, these things are such big advantages, and it seems almost obvious after explaining it, but how valuable it is in keeping that perspective. If our goal is fat loss, protein is pretty clearly like it's extremely beneficial just from the three things that you mentioned. So what is something that we can do now, taking those things into consideration, that we can do to implement getting more protein in our diet, or just increasing the protein intake and kind of balancing that out to help benefit with the process of fat loss? What's the step that we can take for that?
Yeah, I think the thing to think about most is like when it comes to the most bang for my buck, right? And then it's not really a financial thing, that's a nutrient thing. So the idea is if I was to eat one meal and I could only eat this mainly one meal, what would I choose? I'd choose protein because I'm going to stay fuller for longer, right? So I think people start to think about like, I need to eat meat more often. So when we're going down to like when you go out to the grocery store, look for ruminant meats, which would be like, I call those the king, right? So it's going to be ones that graze, such as cows, lambs, bison, etc. But pork and chicken have value as well. It's just all that's better than carbs and crappy fats, right? So first of all, go out to the grocery store, buy some meats, put them in your fridge, eat them a little bit more often. And then when you have a plate, eat meat and protein first on your plate. And it doesn't have to just be meat, right? We're talking about like eggs fit in this category as well. Greek yogurts can fit in this category as well. They're protein based. We look for things that are higher protein based. So on my plate, if I have a plate, I'm going to take it and probably make about 40 to 50% of it protein. And then the other half gets a bit split between fruits and vegetables, or if you have another fat or something of that nature. So we're splitting that up. So half that plate is protein. I'm going to eat my protein first. I don't get to eat any of the other stuff until my protein's gone. Once the protein's gone, then I can go ahead and eat other things if I'm hungry. What this allows you to do is we call it protein leveraging, right? So we're leveraging the protein's ability to make us full. So if we're using this as the ability to make us full, then when I go to eat the other two things, like, well, maybe I don't really want as many vegetables. I'll eat a little bit of the fruit, maybe some pieces of cheese that are on there, and I'm done. I don't have to eat all the food. We reduced our overall calorie intake by eating protein first instead of protein second. So if I was to say like my one call to action, like get people to eat their protein first and eat their fruits and vegetables and other things second, would be like a quick turnaround you can do, but also just putting a lot more meat in your house and making it so that you are eating meat more often.
I think that's kind of an easy step too, just to think about it like that and kind of put it in perspective. Like eating meat first makes it easier to make sure you're getting that those nutrients in your diet. So I know that you said these are the top three things that you said. I know earlier you were telling me you have a lot more reasons. So where can people go to get a little more information if they want to kind of find out a little more about the value of protein and how important it is in our diet? What are some sources that they can go to for that?
Yeah. So the thing to think about the sources that I have are people that are a little bit more on the carnivore side of things. And I'm not asking people to go for carnivore, go deep down into that, like just meat only diet. But these guys really explain the best reasons why protein is really important. And that's why I think they're kind of leading experts in the protein, because they really dove into like, what are all the best parts of protein? So I would check out Dr. Paul Saladino, Dr. Sean Baker, and Dr. Ken Berry. They have YouTube pages that are really good. They do podcasts. They're on tons of podcasts. I don't know if any of them, like I think Paul has his own podcast, but the other ones do a lot of more YouTube stuff. But like either way, you can find them lots of ways. They have articles too. Just Google their name and you'll find where they're at, right? But they'll just teach you a ton about protein, the value of protein. I'm not asking anybody to go animal-based or anything of that nature. I'm just asking people to think more about why protein should be a bigger part of their diet and why it should maybe be the dominant macro in your diet.
Yeah. So those are some great resources. We will have everything that we talked about today on our blog, so you can check it out and kind of see their names if you want to look back on it and kind of see the things that we talked about today. Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope that you enjoyed talking a little bit about protein and how valuable it can be. We hope to have you back on the next episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.
All right. Have a great day, guys.